I'd like to know your point of view.
That this person says that they actually had a diagnosis of a personality disorder and used it in court and it didn't do anything. Yeah, this is a real problem. There's something really backwards and twisted about the way that the family court system is working. And what I see, and what anybody will see if they go through this process, is, first of all, they're going to get accused of things by their ex, or soon to be ex. And one of the big ones is, but the big two that I know of are drug abuse, substance abuse, or some kind of crazy. Like, they're just crazy, they're, something crazy. And especially when it comes to substance abuse. The way that it is in my state, the way it was in my case anyway, was that they have this real swift reaction in court, and the idea is we have to protect the kids first, and then let the person prove to us that they're okay. But get in there, protect the kids first. So the first thing, if someone suggests a substance abuse problem, and even with no evidence at all, or barely any evidence at all, they will put things in place to protect the kids. And to protect the kids, which could be very well putting them in the hands of the abuser with only supervised visits with their loving parent. That could very well be what they do, which is what happened to me. It sets the precedent for the entire divorce, where then just because he just came out and it was this false allegation, it set the tone where I was on the ropes the entire way. And I completely, made a million mistakes. I did it all completely wrong. The advice that I would give anybody now is to not wait to be on the defensive, to come out right away with your position and your story and set the tone for the whole thing. But as far as policy goes and understanding goes, and one of the reasons that I'm here doing this channel is to raise awareness of this problem, because I believe that substance abuse issue, the way that response goes, is appropriate for personality disorders. I don't think it's that appropriate at all for what they're using it for, that substance abuse thing, because if the person is an alcoholic, say, the imminent harm isn't this minute. An alcoholic isn't always in active addiction, always abusive, all the time, 100% of the time. But a narcissist is all the time a narcissist, all the time abusive, all the time a problem. Even when they're on their nice guy plays or nice girl, not acting nice, there's still a problem. There's still something that is psychologically harmful to the kid. And so where I see that reaction, that way that was explained to me, because that is exactly how my lawyer explained it to me, is that they have this responsibility to step in on behalf of the children, and if there's any potential threat, to make sure they protect the kid first, and then worry about letting the adults prove themselves and figure it out and all that. I got the logic of it, but I think it's misplaced. I think it would be very appropriate logic in the case of if someone is accused of a personality disorder, of the repeat history of behavior, and have evidence. Be able to give examples, which he didn't have to have for this whole alcoholic or addict thing. He didn't even have that. He didn't even have events or instances of things that had happened. Didn't even have that. But, so I'm not trying to make it be like it's a pointless thing where anybody could just come in and accuse somebody. But if you can have adequate evidence that someone lacks any kind of empathy, is endangering their child because they're so completely self-focused, I think that anyone whose job it is to protect children needs to know about personality disorders. It is their responsibility to make sure they are up to speed on what the threats to children are. And this is a major threat to children. It is way, way more of a threat than an alcoholic or a drug-addicted parent. And I'm not trying to excuse the drug-addicted parent either, because a drug-addicted parent, in their worst, in their heart of it, the worst of their addiction, is very narcissistic. Very narcissistic. So very, very much better. They're never on the wagon. They're never having a hangover and feeling sorry. They're never sober. They're never, it just is who they are. There is usually, with the addict, there is usually remorse, there's respites, there's reprieves, there's relapses, there's a cycle of it. it's tiring, exhausting, it's not healthy. We get that. But it is, I think, better because it's not the person at their core either. It's not the core of who they are. It is this, you know, thing that's got a hold of them that they're trying to run from, and usually it's abuse and it's their pain. And actually, addicts can be some of the most empathic people that I know. They are some of the most compassionate and most loving and empathic people that I know. And so their behavior can look quite similar to a narcissist when they're at their very, very worst. But a narcissist is always that way, and they don't need any substance to be that way, and they are way more of a threat to their kids because they have no protection, and no protection at all in society, because the society so far is really applauding narcissism. It really applauds narcissism, and particularly American society does. I think there's several cultures that are just really, really especially bad for how we applaud that kind of behavior, particularly in men. It really is. When I look at my whole situation, what happened in my case, and then I listen to stories of my clients and my viewers and all of that, it just, our awareness as a society needs to level up. You know, really needs to level up because, and in fact, it happened to me. I didn't use I had my ex-husband's diagnosis in the divorce, but I never used it. I didn't really understand it. I was in denial about it. I didn't use it. But I did use it when he came back. He hoovered me, in court hoovered me about maybe 8 years after the initial divorce. And at this point, my kids were teenagers. And by that point, I had learned about narcissistic personality disorder, and I, learned about all that. And I brought into court the diagnosis that he received years ago. And same thing. It was almost first of all, it came under all this scrutiny that, when he accused me of stuff, there was no scrutiny about it at all. I mean, it was just he said it and that was good enough. It was just no scrutiny at all. So there were some things going on there. One of them is that I believe that it was a very biased thing. Now, I know there's a whole movement about father's rights in court and all that stuff, and that was really big a few years back. It was really big when my divorce was going on, this whole father's rights thing. And one of the things that worked against me was that we got under a judge who had just won his own nasty divorce, and it was in the papers and stuff, with this whole father's rights case and all that. And I suspect, I know for sure he was a narcissist. It was really awful. So I had the cards stacked really against me. But there is a backlash. There is definitely a backlash against anything that, women, women's rights or whatever, women, the courts going in favor of the kids and all that. The reason that things were going in favor of the courts being kids being with the mom, is because what it really is about is about maintaining the status quo. And that's what the courts really are trying to do more than anything else. It's they don't want to be responsible for making major changes. So they want to keep things at the status quo for the most part. And so that can be very, very frustrating for a lot of reasons. But so if you've got a real problematic situation, getting it really changed is not so easy. And so this is why I had fathers say, that it's so biased against men. But if the situation was started out that way, where the mom was the primary caregiver, the court is going to try and keep that the way that it was. If the father was the one being the primary caregiver, it would work the same way. But what I did see, and I'm not trying to say that there aren't biases against men, because there are, but there's also a bias against women, and that is what my expectations were. The court's expectations of me as a mother were much, much higher than of him as a father. All he really had to do was suggest that I had a substance abuse problem, and all of a sudden it was moms are not supposed to have a substance abuse problem. Mom and drugs, bad. It was no, can't be. Whereas he could be, his father has a narcissism problem. He's too self-absorbed. He isn't empathic. He doesn't, loving. He's society doesn't really so much care about that. It's it's okay if dad's a little bit workaholic, a little bit of a go-getter, a little bit of, you know, 'cause that's the way that it can be made to sound. We don't think of it as that he will, you know, just stomp all over his children or stomp all over his children's mother to reach his goals.